Is it back to business?
Our team, they needed to get back to work. They're excited to be able to make some money again.
The gloves were on, the masks were on. Obviously, it's 6 feet apart.
I don't think I'm in any danger.
It's been a little crazy.
We're not in a huge hurry to open yet.
Tracking our Metro's reopening and what you can expect next, plus the rest of the Metro's top stories straight ahead on Week in Review.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome, I'm Nick Haynes, and thank you for finishing up your week with us. Life has become a whole lot more complicated. In this next 30 minutes, we try to make sense of it all, at least where we live, connecting the dots on the news of our week. From 41 Action News, anchor and reporter Dia Wall. From KMBC 9 News, Michael Mahoney. From the Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. And from KCMO Talk Radio, Pete Mundo. Now, nearly every corner of the Metro is now open in one shape or form, though you may need an extra-large spreadsheet to work out what businesses are open where you live and under what rules. Now, in Wyandotte County, for instance, all restaurants are still closed for dine-in customers. But in Johnson County, you can pretty much eat anywhere as long as the tables are spaced 6 feet apart. Were there mammoth crowds waiting to get in? Did restaurants run out of food? Did police step in to measure the distance between customers? Or did most businesses stay closed even though they were free to swing open the doors, Dia Wall?
Restaurants open, businesses open, but from what we can tell as far as our reporting, there's no big rush for people to get inside. I definitely think restaurants and businesses are taking this advice. They are heeding the guidance from our local and state officials. But the truth is, this is much more about public confidence in safety than it is about the regulations.
Last week, Michael Mahoney, you said the opening slowly in other counties like Platte and Clay counties. You mentioned the word subdued. Was that the word you'd use this week?
Yeah, so far I think I'd stay with that. The proof is going to be in the pudding this weekend. I think Dia is right here. There's going to be a lot of reluctance and a lot of concern by folks going out, especially to restaurants. So we'll see this weekend. It's going to be pretty stormy, but I'll stick with subdued.
Pete Mundo, last week you were interviewing on your radio program an Olathe home decor owner who had opened and jumped the gun even before you were allowed to open in Johnson County. Are we seeing more of these businesses saying it's open season right now? I noticed there's a gym, for instance, in Lee Summit. Even though they can't open right now, hey, we're just going to do it. We're not going to wait any longer.
There's some of that, Nick. There's a lot of frustration, understandably so, among some of these small business owners. But I'm not seeing that happening in mass. It's pocketed. It gets more attention when it does happen. It's a good story for the media. But I don't see that mass revolt opening up when you're technically not supposed to be happening in large swaths across the metro. It's happening in pockets, but it's not overwhelmingly happening. But also what you're seeing, to the Dia's point, Michael's point with the restaurants, you're seeing this notion that people can make the safe decision for themselves without necessarily a politician telling them what is best. And it's working. People are being safe. They're being smart. They're not flooding restaurants. And I think we're seeing that work out in real time.
Even in Kansas City, Dave Helling, I see the Kansas City Zoo can open this weekend. All of our museums can open this weekend. Yet I see no evidence that's actually happening. Why?
Like a lot of institutions, those public places are trying to figure out, Nick, what's safest. Mayor Quinton Lucas had a news conference this week to announce his sort of relaxation, if you will, of the 10-10-10 proposal. And he said the big objective is to reduce the number of crowds that they have to face. They're really worried about passing the virus in big groups as opposed to maybe 30 or 40 people in a restaurant or whatever. And places like the zoo would be a crowd. There's no question about it, particularly if the weather improves, particularly around Memorial Day. So the next big focus, if you will, I think, will be places like that, and farmers markets and baseball games and other places where you might expect lots of folks to congregate. That's going to be the next sort of battleground, if you will, over this issue.
We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But in Kansas City, Missouri, let's stay there for a minute. As you mentioned, Mayor Quinton Lucas, He was this week ditching many of the city's most stringent requirements for restaurants. Gone is a rule that restaurants could only operate at 10% capacity. Now they can open as long as tables are 10 feet apart. You may remember a week ago the mayor dropping a requirement the restaurants write down the names and numbers of customers who enter their establishments. When we have the head of public health in Kansas City warning the city is opening up too soon, we have a national report putting KC on a list of cities to watch due to an uptick in COVID cases. Why Michael Mahoney was the mayor so quick to relax the rules that he himself thought was so essential even last week?
Well, he felt a great deal of pressure from the Restaurant Association that almost from the outbreak or the start, poor choice of words there, from the start of the 10-10-10 regulation proposal, the restaurants were saying, look, 10%, 25%, 50% will not work for the Kansas City restaurant owners. And so they went to him and lobbied very hard. I believe there was a meeting a week ago today between the Restaurant Association and the mayor. There was another one earlier this week. They said, look, we have to have some flexibility here. So they backed off on that. I was surprised that the health director, Rex Archer, went along with that, but he also believes that social distancing is a key here. Now, that list that they want to keep, it remains a recommendation. And I think a whole bunch of restaurants will probably do that, namely because a lot of them always have taken reservations. That's a list as well. And I also think that the servers will be wearing masks. I think there's going to be some encouragement to have the customers in dining facilities and experiences wearing masks. There aren't going to be salad bars, buffets, or self-drink stations. I think there was a lot of pressure from the Restaurant Association to give them something else.
So if you put enough pressure on an elected official, they're willing to cave on this, then it seems, Dia Wall. I notice even in Jackson County, they now say, well, churches can now open with occupancy limits rather than limiting them to just 10 people coming into a church. Is that relating to the fact that too many people were complaining? And there was also a lawsuit filed in Lee Summit from the Abundant Life Church. They're saying this was unconstitutional.
Yes. This all stems from complaints, right? If you go back to the restaurants keeping the list, I think we have to go to the heart of why that was even suggested in the first place. It's so if somebody comes in with the virus, they have an easy way to call you and say, hey, you may want to quarantine so you're not spreading this to your family. As far as the churches, this has also become a political issue somehow, when really the goal is not to have 20 or 30,000 people at some of the larger churches that we have in the metro, because people are getting sick and dying from this virus. And so I understand faith is incredibly important, especially here in the Midwest, and people want to gather and people want to worship. But I think that somehow, some way, we have gotten beyond what the goal of some of these recommendations are to political talking points.
But in that case, yeah.
Struggle.
But in that case, though, in Lee Summit with the church, they believed that they were not acting in the same way for different businesses and venues, that they were being penalized, right, Michael?
Right, and that was the foundation of the ruling over in Kansas a few weeks ago about church services versus commercial businesses, and that's why the judge ruled the way he did in that case. The other point I want to make with respect to the restaurants is that there is a feeling that this is a distinctive sort of business to begin with, and that cleaning tables, bussing tables, and cleanliness and city regulations or health regulations are already a big part of that business. And so they feel like, number one, they were distinctive, and number two, that they're already very involved in the sanitation element of this. And so they think that because of that distinctive nature, they needed another set of guidelines.
Now, many people are craving a return to sports, but unbeknownst to many of us, it's already happened. Over the weekend, more than 500 kids from 47 teams converged on a sports facility in suburban St. Louis for a Missouri youth baseball tournament. Participants and families agreed to abide by social distancing rules and avoid high-fiving after a good play. And apparently, it went off smoothly enough that there's another tournament planned for this weekend.
I think we can see that, especially outdoor sports right now, we can do this.
And closer to home, eyebrows were raised when large crowds of high school football players converged on Central High School in Kansas City for a scrimmage put on by local coaches.
Why is we making a big deal about it when the mayor, the governor ain't making a big deal about it? If he opened up the state, then apparently he feel like it's okay.
So if you're willing to go to a big event right now and someone is willing to organize it, is there really anything stopping you, Pete Mundo, particularly when law enforcement seems to not want to get engaged?
Sure. Can they do something? Yes. Do I think it's a wise use of the city's time? Not at all, not whatsoever. I mean, we know what the numbers are for young people versus those who are older with possible pre-existing conditions. Now, if you're a young person and you're 17 and you live with somebody at home like that, different ball game. But the idea that we're going to now look at these young people who, by the way, it's in their nature, they're high school athletes, they've got the energy, you can't go out and play a game of touch football. If that's the road we're going to go down, I mean, that does not seem like a wise use of resources here in KCMO or anywhere for that matter.
I'd be a little nervous. Pete just talked about young kids being aggressive. There's a new disease popping up all over the country with younger victims of COVID and an inflammatory disease. And if you've seen those pictures, they're pretty damn scary. So before we completely give blanket immunity to kids, I think we want to think about that a little bit. And in the second place, what will tell the tale on all of this is whether cases in Kansas City go up, whether the region has an explosion of cases, in which case all of this loosening will get another visit. If, however, Kansas City continues to sort of, if you will, underperform in terms of the number of cases and fatalities, then I think the pressure to continue to loosen will gain steam. And by the 1st of June, middle of June, there will be a semblance of normalcy in the region.
There seems to be a pushback, though, by the way, Pete Mundo, on the number of cases. How valuable that is as a statistic. Isn't it more valuable to say how many people are being hospitalized because we have more testing taking place?
And to the KCMO Health Department's credit, after we talked about it last week, this week they have expanded their database of what the public can see, where now you can see that there's under 100 hospitalizations due to coronavirus since this started in KCMO proper. We have the ages of those people who have passed, and it's similar to what we're seeing nationwide, about 70% or 70 years and older. So they're sharing that information. And yes, percent positive is really the number we should be looking at, not total numbers of people who are testing positive, but percent positive. That still is not on their platform, but it's a lot better than it was a week ago.
Michael Mahoney.
Pete's point there is really important. The equation to look at, the math to work on this, is the number of positive cases versus the number of tests, that percentage. If that's under 10% or so, that's a pretty good indicator, but that's the way to look at it. And one other thing I want to go back to with respect to that high school football game, this simply wasn't a game of touch football. This was orchestrated by coaches, according to the reports. And if that is the case, that is highly irresponsible. And just another example of sports thinking that, they deserve a special place. I'm a huge sports fan, but if the coaches actually organize this, that's not good.
And I should point out, by the way, the Kansas City, Missouri School District, because it happened at one of their facilities, they said they weren't involved. They didn't in any way condone this. But I was looking at your body language when Michael Mahoney was talking about testing there, dear.
Because I think that we're missing the point. There is broad consensus that there has not been enough testing when it comes to COVID-19 across the country, in our states, and in our cities, period. Everyone is in agreement on that. If you got to have 5 symptoms to go get tested, we could be missing a large swath of the population that's asymptomatic. Look at what's happening in prisons. And so I think that we have to be really careful. I understand the numbers may not tell the full picture, and I think we can all agree on that as well. But we need to be really careful underestimating how quickly and how violently this virus can spread.
Dia, there is no question that there are not enough tests, and that was not my point. The point I was trying to make, and apparently not well, is the fact that the number of positives versus divided by the number of tests will give you, or I believe anyway, a sense of the true spread.
Okay, this week, the family of a nurse at Research Medical Center who died after contracting the coronavirus has filed suit claiming she didn't have adequate safety equipment to treat patients with the virus. But is it going to become virtually impossible to take legal action in future? Last week, I mentioned how Missouri was now working on a new immunity law that would prohibit medical facilities and nursing homes from being sued during this pandemic. Now, the state of Kansas is taking that immunity law even further. Lawmakers are crafting a bill that would block lawsuits against not just hospitals and nursing homes, but almost all businesses. What's the motivation behind this legislation, Dave?
Well, clearly, business owners are petrified at the idea that they might be held liable not only for customers who come in and catch COVID-19, but employees or others, or that they might become a vector for the disease. And so they want some sort of liability protection so they don't get sued like crazy if that happens. On the other hand, to extend immunity to those businesses would be, in some people's eyes, a license for those business owners to act irresponsibly.
Dear.
People want the freedom to say, well, I'll wear a mask if I want to, and I won't if I don't. But guess what? You could be carrying this virus and not know it. And then you can go into a business and infect everyone in there. But the people who get sick, and if anyone unfortunately horribly dies, they're not coming after you. They're coming after that business owner. So especially small businesses, they really do want that protection. But I completely agree with Dave. This is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Because if you can't promise people safety, then they're going to have a lot less confidence going to these businesses.
Okay, last week, Michael Mahoney, you mentioned, for instance, the Kansas legislature is only coming back for one day. So they're going to be passing a budget. They've got issues like reining in the governor. They're concerned about how much power she has. They're looking at Medicaid expansion. And this as well. How can they possibly be passing all of this in just less than 24 hours?
I think that is going to be one of the keys here. And from the legislators' point of view, the Republican majority in the House and the Senate, they're very concerned that they're going to have a one-day session. And at the end of it, whenever that is, at 11 o'clock at night or 1 a.m. the next morning, they are going to adjourn. They're out. And then the governor can come back, and if she doesn't like a particular piece of legislation that they passed, she can veto it, and they would have no recourse about coming back to try and override that veto because they would be out of session.
Yeah, I mean, this is also happening at the national level. I don't think it should be a hyper-partisan issue, but Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy have made it pretty clear that any fifth coronavirus bill has got to involve something like this on the protection of lawsuits for business owners. And I don't think that's a hyper-partisan issue. I think it is reasonable. Yes, I think places of business should be practicing, using best practices, but let's not forget, I mean, we cannot promise people safety in any way, shape, or form. That's not feasible in a free society.
Pete is right. You can't promise people safety, but when you go into a restaurant or a place of business, you have a reasonable expectation that your health would not be put at risk by patronizing that business or going into the workplace. And if there is no regulatory environment to sort of restrain business owners from not pursuing best practices, then it's Katie bar the door. And so I do think it will become more partisan than Pete thinks.
6 months from now, we will be heading to the polls to vote in a presidential election. Now, we'll also be deciding U.S. Senate seats and governorships, including right here in our own backyard. If you haven't heard about any of these candidates in a while, it's hardly surprising when the virus has consumed news coverage. Will coronavirus be the defining issue that will determine how you vote? The candidates are positioning themselves that way. The leading Democrat running for the U.S. Senate seat in Kansas is out with her first TV ad, and she's trying to convince you that her background as a doctor makes her the right fit for this unusual moment.
For me, healthcare isn't just another issue. It's in my DNA. Mom was a nurse, Dad, a doctor. They raised us to help people whenever we could. It's why I became a doctor, too.
Republican candidate Dave Lindstrom, a longtime small business and restaurant owner, says his experience is more valuable. In a new media announcement, he laments how we're letting criminals free while jailing business owners. Have all the other issues now been trumped, so to speak, by our response to the coronavirus, Pete?
We'll see. I think it will play an enormous role. I think it will be probably issue number one when we get to that point in time. But it will also be health/economic, right? I mean, that's what this is all coming down to, how we handle the health side of this, the public health side of this, and also the economic side of this, not just in terms of how things were the last 6 months, but looking ahead.
Back to Lindstrom's contention, he says, are they letting criminals free in Kansas, Michael Mahoney, while jailing business owners?
No, not really. They have a couple of isolated cases. Just to elaborate on this, Another physician is in that U.S. Senate race, and that's Roger Marshall. He's a OBGYN, and he's had a couple of commercials up already where he's talking about his experience as a doctor as it relates to public service, and he also ties in his respect for life in there. I think that the overriding issue in this campaign is going to be the performance of Donald Trump.
Thinking locally here, do you think this benefits incumbents this election year, particularly when coronavirus is taking up all of the news attention? Somebody like Sharice Davids is running in the Kansas 3rd District. All of her opponents get barely any play because nobody seems to be interested in anything but this issue.
I mean, I think that'll change as we get closer to November, particularly with the presidential election, Nick. There will be a focus on the 3rd District, the Senate race, the Missouri governor's race. By the way, I should throw in just quickly and parenthetically, we have an election in Kansas City June 2nd. I mean, that's less than 3 weeks away on the sales tax increase for fire equipment. And that is an election in which people will actually have to go to the polls. My prediction is that the turnout will be the worst in Kansas City history. I mean, literally 5-6% may be showing up to cast ballots in that election, which shows you another sort of dynamic in this picture is how many people are actually going to vote if the coronavirus is still an issue.
You know, we get a lot of calls here, and we've had people who are absolutely outraged. For instance, they couldn't get on the unemployment site in Kansas, couldn't get the money they wanted. They've not liked, say, Governor Kelly's plans to reopen. It's too sluggish, too cautious, too slow. I have my family I have to take care of. Yet she doesn't face voters for another 2 years. Yet we have a governor in our area, of course, who does. In November, Mike Parson will be facing voters. But he's on your newscast, I see, on Michael Mahoney and Dear Wall, almost every single night, it seems, with his news briefings. So that means his opponent doesn't get any attention. Does that benefit him, Pete Mundo?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, who's talking about Nicole Galloway? And that's not a knock, but she always had a tough uphill climb, right? I mean, Donald Trump won the state by 20 points in 2016. Parson, I know he came in under an uncomfortable circumstance, but he was always going to be a double-digit favorite. I think that increases. And even if people don't love how Governor Parson has handled this, if he loses to Nicole Galloway, President Trump will be lucky to get 100 electoral votes. I mean, that's how big of an upset that would be as things stand right now. So it still is a major uphill climb for his likely opponent, Nicole Galloway.
Well, real quick to Pete's point, I think his assessment is right, but he's got it backwards. Parson State depends a lot on Trump's coattails, and his approval rating in the state of Missouri is not as strong as it was just a few years ago.
When you put a program like this together every week, we can't get to every headline making the news in Kansas City. What was the big story we missed? Funeral services for the slain Overland Park police officer killed while pursuing a hit-and-run suspect. Plans to open a detention center for migrant kids at a former Kansas City hospital are withdrawn. Missouri Republicans put plan to overturn Clean Missouri on the November ballot. Prairie Village set to vote next week on whether they should become the first city in the metro to require face masks. Though the cases keep rising and so do the deaths, a judge dismisses a lawsuit from Kansas inmates who allege dangerous conditions. Some progress is happening. Drone shots released this week of the new look KCI. And a concert's back. They are at Knuckleheads downtown, our area's first performance space to reopen, though at a 10% occupancy limit. If you're still nervous about heading out, live music is back from the comfort of your couch, courtesy of KC Bands Together. 2 nights of back-to-back performances this weekend from dozens of local artists performing live sets from their living rooms.
I'd like to build the world a home and furnish it with love.
So panelists, did you pick one of these or something completely different, Dear Wall?
While you were sleeping, the state of Missouri repealed the Clean Missouri redistricting plan. So here's the deal. To your point, we've been covering a lot of coronavirus, but voters they already had their say on how they wanted the lines to be drawn in the state of Missouri. Now it's on the ballot to toss all of that out. So that's what happened. That's what I choose.
Dave Helling.
Kansas City, Missouri's budget continues to be shredded by the coronavirus. The revenue just isn't coming in. Restaurant and hotel taxes down 90%. the public subsidy for the Power and Light District, which at $15 million was the subject of great criticism, is now going to $30 million a year, according to some projections. That's a lot of police officers. That's going to be an issue going forward.
Is Kansas City, though, uniquely hit by this? Are they being hit more than other communities?
They just may be, Nick, uniquely ignoring it. I mean, I think state governments, local governments are all understanding it. Kansas City's day of reckoning is here.
Michael Mahoney.
I'm going to add to Dave's point here in the sense that that same report that came out in the middle of the week also proposed under our worst case scenario 500 city worker furloughs or layoffs, including cops and firefighters. And so to his point about this being a serious problem for the finances of Kansas City, Missouri, and all communities for that matter, that meeting and the things that Dave just talked about and this potential for lots of layoffs of city workers is a big story that we did not talk about today.
And also, of course, Kansas City, Missouri, because it's less than 500,000 people, wasn't getting any of that federal cash. Did they end up solving that issue with Jackson County this week, Michael?
No, they did not. That it still stands out there. And the mayor is getting increasingly frustrated about this. In fact, he was on Pete's show on Thursday morning saying, hey, if they want receipts and accountability, okay, but this is not like me submitting a hotel receipt for a trip to Holiday Inn in Buffalo. Now, come on. He doesn't think it's sufficient. It is not settled as we take this.
Just very quickly, Johnson County is being asked to give cities money, and they're telling cities to pound sand. This is going to be a big issue across the region.
Pete Mundo.
Well, you guys just stole all my thunder. That was my answer. It was the showdown between Mayor Lucas and Frank White. Throw in Troy Schulte, who used to be the city manager, who's now working for Jackson County, and you could not write a script like this. It is going to be fascinating to watch it unfold.
Checking in with us on this week's news, Dia Wall from 41 Action News and Michael Mahoney from KMBC 9 News, the Kansas City Star's Dave Helling, and weekday mornings 6 to 10 on KCMO Talk Radio, Pete Mundo. And I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, keep calm and carry on.